Amara's fingers trembled as she held the small white pill against the roof of her mouth, letting the bitter taste spread across her tongue while she forced herself to swallow nothing but saliva. Her husband Kwame stood inches away, his dark eyes fixed on her throat, watching for the telltale movement that would confirm she'd taken her medicine. She'd performed this ritual every evening for 6 months, but tonight was different. Tonight, she was done being his obedient wife. "Good girl," Kwame said, his voice dripping with false tenderness as he handed her the glass of water. Amara took a careful sip, feeling the pill tucked safely in the pocket of her cheek. Her heart hammered against her ribs so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "Now lie down and rest. You know how these headaches exhaust you." Amara nodded weakly and shuffled toward their bedroom in their small house in Atlanta's West End neighborhood, making sure her steps were unsteady enough to seem convincing. The moment she heard Kwame's footsteps retreat down the hallway, she spat the pill into her palm and shoved it deep into the pocket of her cotton nightgown. This was the third pill she'd hidden this week. The fog that had consumed her mind for months was finally beginning to lift, and with clarity came a terrifying question. Why had her loving husband been drugging her? She lay on the bed, forcing her breathing to slow and deepen, mimicking the heavy sleep that usually claimed her within minutes of taking those pills. Through barely open eyelids, she watched the bedroom door. Minutes stretched like hours. Then she heard it, the creak of the floorboard outside their room, the one near the photograph of Kwame's late mother. The door opened slowly, and Kwame's silhouette filled the doorframe. "Amara," he whispered. She didn't respond, keeping her body completely still. "Baby, you asleep." She maintained her facade of unconsciousness as he approached the bed. His footsteps were careful, calculated. She felt his presence looming over her, felt his breath as he leaned close to her face. Then he did something that made her blood run cold. He lifted her arm and let it drop, testing her, making sure she was truly unconscious. Satisfied, Kwame walked to her side of the closet and pulled out a small lockbox she'd never noticed before, hidden behind her winter coats. Her mind raced. How long had that been there? The click of the lock opening seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. Through her lashes, she watched him remove something, but she couldn't see what. He tucked whatever it was into his jacket pocket and left the room, pulling the door almost closed behind him. Amara waited, counting her heartbeats. 100, 200. When she reached 500, she slowly sat up, her head clearer than it had been in months. The apartment was silent except for the distant sound of traffic on Metropolitan Parkway. Where had Kwame gone? She crept to the bedroom door and peered out. The living room was empty, but she could see light spilling from beneath the door of the spare room. The room Kwame had claimed as his home office 3 months ago, the room he always kept locked, the room she was forbidden to enter. Amara's bare feet made no sound on the hardwood floor as she approached the door. Her hand reached for the knob, and to her shock, it turned. He'd forgotten to lock it. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she pushed the door open just enough to see inside. What she saw made her stomach drop and her knees buckle. The walls were covered, completely covered with photographs. But these weren't family pictures or memories from their 3 years of marriage. These were surveillance photos. Of her, hundreds of them. Amara at the grocery store. Amara at her sister Nia's house. Amara at work before she'd quit her job as a nurse 6 months ago, around the same time the pills had started. Some photos were dated, going back 5 years, 2 years before they'd even met. In the center of the room sat a desk with 3 computer monitors, all displaying what looked like live camera feeds. She recognized their bedroom, their kitchen, their bathroom, and then she saw the notebook lying open on the desk, filled with Kwame's handwriting. The page was titled Subject, Amara Thompson, Day 187. Her hands shook as she reached for the notebook, but before her fingers could touch it, she heard the front door of the apartment open. Kwame was back. Amara's breath caught in her throat. She had seconds, maybe less, to get back to the bedroom before Kwame discovered her awake and in his forbidden room. She spun away from the desk, her mind screaming at her to move faster, but her legs felt like lead. The front door clicked shut. His keys jangled as he set them on the entry table. She slipped out of the office, pulling the door to the exact position she'd found it, slightly ajar, not quite closed. Her feet carried her swiftly across the living room, and she dove into bed just as she heard Kwame's footsteps approaching down the hall. She arranged herself in the same position as before, forcing her racing heart to calm, willing her chest to rise and fall in the rhythm of deep sleep. The bedroom door creaked open wider. Kwame stood there and she could feel his eyes on her. Then she heard something that made her want to scream, the unmistakable sound of a camera shutter. He was photographing her while she slept. How many times had he done this? How many pictures existed of her unconscious, vulnerable, completely unaware? Perfect, he murmured to himself. Just perfect. He left again, and this time Amara heard him enter the office. She waited, counting heartbeats again, fighting the urge to leap from the bed and run. But run where? This was her home, her life, and she needed answers before she made any moves. 20 minutes later, Kwame returned to their bedroom and climbed into bed beside her. The mattress dipped under his weight. She felt him settle in, heard his breathing slow. Within half an hour, he was snoring softly. Only then did Amara allow herself to think clearly. Everything from the past 6 months suddenly made horrible sense. The headaches that had started from nowhere. Kwame's insistence that she see his friend Dr. Morrison instead of her regular physician. The medication that was supposed to help but only made her foggy and tired. Her decision to quit her nursing job because she couldn't handle the stress anymore. A decision that now felt planted in her mind rather than chosen. Her growing isolation from friends and family because she was too exhausted to see them. Kwame had been systematically dismantling her life, and she'd been too drugged to notice. The next morning, Amara played her part perfectly. She woke groggy and disoriented, just as she had every morning for months. She let Kwame make her breakfast, oatmeal with honey, coffee with cream, and she ate it while he watched her with those attentive eyes that she'd once thought showed love but now recognized as something far more sinister. "How are you feeling today, baby?" he asked, reaching across their small kitchen table to touch her hand. "Tired," she mumbled, which wasn't a lie. She'd barely slept, her mind churning through the nightmare her marriage had become. "My head still hurts." "I know, sweetheart, I know." His thumb traced circles on her skin. "Dr. Morrison said it might take time for the medication to fully work. We just need to be patient." Patient? The word made her want to throw the coffee in his face. Instead, she nodded weakly and took another bite of oatmeal. "I have to run some errands today," Kwame said, standing and taking his plate to the sink. "Will you be okay here alone?" Alone. He wanted her alone and drugged and unconscious in this apartment that he'd turned into a surveillance prison. "I'll probably just sleep," Amara said. "Good, that's good." He kissed her forehead, and it took everything in her not to flinch away. "I'll be back around 4. Take your afternoon pill at 2, okay? I've left it on the nightstand for you." The moment his car pulled out of the apartment complex parking lot, Amara was up and moving. The fog in her head was still there, residual effects from months of whatever he'd been giving her, but determination cut through it like a knife. She went straight to the office. In daylight, the room was even more disturbing. The photographs covered every inch of wall space. Some were candid shots from a distance. Others were close-ups taken with a telephoto lens. There were images of her sleeping, showering, changing clothes. Her skin crawled as she realized the bathroom camera must be hidden in the vent above the shower. She'd never thought to look up. The notebook sat where she'd seen it last night. With shaking hands, she opened it to the first page. Subject Amara Thompson, it read. Age 29. Occupation, registered nurse, Grady Memorial Hospital. Resides, Oakland City, Atlanta. Family, mother deceased, father deceased, sister Nia Thompson, 32, teacher. Known associates, limited. Profile, isolated, vulnerable, trusting, perfect candidate. Perfect candidate for what? She flipped through pages of observations, notes about her daily routines, her habits, her fears. There were entries from before they'd met. Kwame had been watching her, studying her, for 2 years before he'd accidentally bumped into her at the coffee shop on Cascade Road where he'd spilled his latte on her scrubs and insisted on buying her a replacement drink. Their entire relationship had been constructed, planned, orchestrated. But why? Amara's hands trembled as she turned to more recent entries. Day 156, subject showing increased compliance, memory lapses more frequent, reduced contact with sister to once per month, excellent progress. Day 172, subject agreed to quit job, social isolation nearly complete, ready for Phase 2. Phase 2? What was Phase 2? She flipped to the most recent entry, the one from last night. Day 187, subject fully conditioned. Tomorrow begins the transfer. AM will arrive at 16:00 to finalize paperwork. Payment, $50,000. Subject will be transported to facility by 18:00. After 6 months of preparation, subject is ready for her new purpose. The notebook slipped from Amara's fingers and hit the floor. Transported to facility. New purpose. Payment of $50,000. Kwame wasn't just drugging her and watching her. He was selling her. And someone was coming to pick her up today at 4 o'clock. Amara's legs gave out and she collapsed into Kwame's desk chair, her mind reeling. 4 o'clock. That gave her less than 5 hours. 5 hours to figure out what to do, where to go, how to save herself from whatever nightmare Kwame had planned. Her hands shook so violently she had to clasp them together to make them stop. She forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, just like she'd learned in nursing school when dealing with trauma patients. She was a nurse, or had been before Kwame had convinced her to give it all up. She knew how to stay calm in emergencies. This was just another emergency. A catastrophic, life-threatening emergency, but she could handle it. Think, Amara, think. She couldn't go to the police. What would she tell them? That her husband had been giving her pills and taking pictures. They'd ask if she felt threatened, if he'd hurt her physically, and the truth was he'd been nothing but gentle and caring on the surface. She had no proof of what those pills contained. Dr. Morrison would back up Kwame's story about her headaches and medication. It would be her word against theirs, and she was the one who'd been acting confused and forgetful for months. They'd probably think she was having a mental breakdown. She needed evidence, real, undeniable evidence. Amara grabbed her phone from her pocket. Kwame had never taken it away, probably because he'd been monitoring it, and started photographing everything. The walls of pictures, the notebook pages, the computer monitors showing the live feeds from cameras hidden throughout their apartment. She worked quickly, methodically, her nurse's training kicking in as she documented everything like it was a crime scene. Because it was a crime scene, she just had to make someone else see it that way. When she'd photographed everything she could, she turned to the computer. The monitors were password protected, but Kwame had left himself logged in. Arrogant. He'd been so certain she'd be unconscious that he hadn't bothered to secure his system. She clicked through files and folders, her horror growing with each discovery. There were folders for other women. Subject, Keisha Williams. Subject, Tanya Johnson. Subject, Marie Davis. Each folder contained the same kind of surveillance photos, detailed notes, timelines. The folders were marked completed. Completed? What did that mean? Where were these women now? Amara's stomach churned as she opened an email folder labeled transactions. The messages were coded, but their meaning was clear enough. Kwame was part of a network, a trafficking network. He found vulnerable women, isolated them, drugged them into compliance, and then sold them to the highest bidder. The emails referenced facilities in different states, training programs, conditioning protocols. One email dated 3 days ago made her blood freeze. Subject, AT ready for transfer. Client, AM will collect on 2/5 at 16:00. Payment confirmed. Subject conditioned for domestic placement. No family complications expected. Domestic placement. They were going to make her a slave. A literal slave in someone's home, too drugged and broken to escape or ask for help. But there was a line that gave her a sliver of hope. No family complications expected. Kwame thought she was too isolated to have anyone who'd look for her. He'd underestimated her sister. Nia, fierce, protective Nia who'd been calling more frequently lately, who'd shown up at the apartment 2 weeks ago demanding to know why Amara looked so thin and tired. Kwame had turned her away, saying Amara was sleeping, and Amara had been too foggy to even know her sister had been there. But Nia wouldn't stop looking. Nia never gave up on the people she loved. Amara pulled out her phone and started to call her sister, then stopped. If Kwame was monitoring her phone, and he probably was, a call to Nia would alert him that something was wrong. She needed to be smarter than that. She opened her photos and selected the most damning images she'd just taken. The notebook page about the transfer, the email about her sale, the wall of surveillance photos. She sent them to Nia through a messaging app Kwame didn't know she had, buried 3 screens deep in her phone. Then she typed, "Not safe. Being sold today at 4 p.m. Don't call. Don't come here. Go to police. Show them this. I love you." Her finger hovered over the send button. Once she pressed it, there was no going back. Kwame would know she knew, but she was out of options and out of time. She pressed send. The message showed as delivered. Nia was a teacher. She'd be in class right now, her phone on silent. But she always checked her messages during her lunch break at noon. That gave Amara 1 hour to hope her sister would see the message and act on it. 1 hour before Amara had to make a decision about what to do next. She closed the office door and returned everything to exactly how she'd found it. Then she went to the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. Her reflection shocked her. When had she gotten so thin? Her cheekbones jutted out sharply and dark circles ringed her eyes. Her hair, once thick and healthy, hung limp and dull around her face. She looked like a ghost of herself. That's what Kwame had wanted, to erase who she was and replace her with someone broken and controllable. But Amara Thompson wasn't broken yet. She walked to the bedroom and picked up the pill Kwame had left on her nightstand. The little white tablet sat there innocently, like it had every day for 6 months. She studied it, this tiny thing that had stolen half a year of her life. Then she flushed it down the toilet. At noon she checked her phone. 3 missed calls from Nia, 2 voicemails, a flood of text messages. "Oh my God, Amara, I'm calling the police right now. I'm on my way to the precinct. Stay safe, hide if you can. The detective wants to talk to you. Can you get out of the house? Amara, please respond. I need to know you're okay." Relief flooded through her so powerfully she had to sit down. Nia had believed her. Nia was getting help. But would help arrive before 4 o'clock, before this mysterious AM showed up to collect her like a package? She typed back, "I'm okay, still home. He'll be back at 4 with buyer. I'll try to record everything." Nia's response was immediate. "No, get out now. Detective says leave. I'm coming to get you." Amara started to type a response, then heard the sound that made her heart stop. A car door slamming in the parking lot. She rushed to the living room window and peered through the blinds. Kwame's silver Honda was pulling into his usual spot, but it was only 12:30. He wasn't supposed to be back until 4. He'd come home early. And Amara had no way out. Panic seized Amara's chest like a vice. She looked around wildly, her mind racing through impossible options. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. Jumping was out of the question. The only exit was the front door, and Kwame would be coming through it any second. She could hear his footsteps on the exterior stairs, getting closer. She shoved her phone into her bra and ran to the bedroom, throwing herself onto the bed in the same position she'd been in that morning. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain it would give her away, but she forced her breathing to slow. forced her body to go limp, forced her face into the slack expression of someone heavily sedated. The apartment door opened. Kwame's footsteps crossed the threshold. But then she heard something that made her blood turn to ice. A second set of footsteps. Someone was with him. "She's in the bedroom," Kwame said, his voice casual, businesslike. "Still out from the morning dose. I gave her a double this morning to make sure she'd be compliant for the transfer." A double dose. If she'd actually taken those pills, she'd be completely unconscious right now, maybe even in danger of an overdose. The realization of how little her life meant to him settled over her like a heavy blanket. "Good," a woman's voice responded. Sharp, professional, cold. "This must be AM. I prefer them sedated for transport. Less trouble. Let me see her." Footsteps approached the bedroom. Through her barely open eyelids, Amara saw two figures enter. Kwame and a tall black woman in a business suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, carrying a leather briefcase. The woman had to be in her 50s, with sharp features and calculating eyes that swept over Amara like she was examining livestock. "She's exactly as described," the woman said. "Good muscle tone despite the sedation, no visible marks or scars. The client will be pleased." She pulled out her phone and took several photos of Amara from different angles. Amara wanted to scream, to fight, to run, but she remained perfectly still. Her phone was pressed against her chest, and she realized with a surge of desperate hope that if it was recording audio or video, she might be capturing evidence right now. But she didn't dare check. Any movement could give her away. "The payment," Kwame said. "We agreed on 50,000. "And you'll get it once she's secured in the vehicle," the woman replied. "I don't pay for merchandise I haven't taken possession of. That's standard protocol." Merchandise. They were talking about her like she was a used car. "Fine," Kwame said, but Amara could hear the tension in his voice. "When will you?" "We leave now," the woman interrupted. "I moved the timeline up. There's been some increased police activity in the area. I don't like to take chances." "No, no, no, no. Nia wouldn't have reached the police yet. They couldn't be here." Which meant the woman was talking about unrelated police activity, but it had spooked her enough to move up the schedule. Amara was going to be taken right now, and no one was coming to help her. Now Kwame sounded surprised. "But I thought." "I don't care what you thought. I have a transport vehicle downstairs. We'll take her through the back entrance. Do you have her documents ready?" "Yes, everything's in the office. Birth certificate, social security card, medical records. I erased her digital footprint like you asked. Canceled her social media accounts, her email. As far as anyone knows, Amara Thompson is about to disappear on a spontaneous trip to visit family out of state." "What about the sister?" the woman asked sharply. "Handled. I've been limiting their contact for months. Nia thinks Amara's been depressed and pulling away. She won't suspect anything for weeks, maybe months. By then, the trail will be ice cold." The woman made a satisfied sound. "You're more thorough than the last contractor I worked with. He left loose ends everywhere. I had to clean up his mess personally." The way she said "clean up" made Amara's skin crawl. "Now help me get her ready for transport." Kwame moved closer to the bed. Amara felt his hand slide under her shoulders. "I'll carry her to the car. She weighs next to nothing now." This was it. Once they got her in that vehicle, she'd disappear forever into whatever nightmare facility they had planned. She'd be drugged, controlled, broken down until she forgot she'd ever been Amara Thompson, registered nurse, sister to Nia, a person with dreams and a life of her own. As Kwame lifted her from the bed, Amara made a split-second decision. She went completely limp, letting her head loll to the side. Her eyes rolled back slightly, and she let out a soft, disturbing moan. "What was that?" the woman asked sharply. "Nothing. She does that sometimes when she's heavily sedated," Kwame said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Amara moaned again, louder this time, and let her body twitch. She'd seen enough patients have seizures during her nursing career. She knew how to mimic the warning signs. "She's having a reaction," the woman snapped. "Put her down." "She's fine, it's just—" "I said put her down." The woman's voice cracked like a whip. "I don't transport damaged goods. If she's overdosing, that's your problem, not mine." Kwame laid Amara back on the bed, and she let her arms jerk involuntarily, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. She fluttered her eyelids and made a choking sound. "You said you gave her a double dose this morning," the woman demanded. "Yes, but she's been taking them for months without you monitoring her reactions because you kept her unconscious, you idiot." The woman was furious now. "If she dies before the transfer, you get nothing. Do you understand? Nothing." "She's not going to die," Kwame insisted, but Amara could hear the panic creeping into his voice. "She just needs. She needs medical attention, which means she needs to be conscious and stable before I take her anywhere." The woman's phone buzzed, and she answered it with a curt, "What?" She listened for a moment, her expression darkening. "How many units? Where?" Another pause. "Fine, I'm aborting this pickup. Too much heat in the area." She turned to Kwame. "There's a police operation 2 blocks from here. Multiple units. They're looking for someone, and I'm not sticking around to find out who. You stabilize your subject and contact me when she's ready for transport. Not before." "But what about my payment?" Kwame protested. "You'll get paid when I get my merchandise in sellable condition. Right now, you've got a woman who might be seizing from an overdose in your bedroom. Deal with it." The woman's footsteps retreated rapidly. The apartment door opened and slammed shut. Kwame stood over Amara, his breathing heavy. She could feel his eyes on her, could sense his indecision. Then he did something she didn't expect. He grabbed her shoulders and shook her hard. "Amara, Amara, wake up. Come on, baby, wake up." She didn't respond, keeping her body limp. "Damn it." He released her and she heard him packing, muttering to himself. Okay, think. If she's really overdosing, I need to. But if I call 911, they'll ask questions. They'll find the pills. They'll find everything." He was spiraling, she realized. His carefully constructed plan was falling apart. His phone rang, the sound sharp in the tense silence. "What?" he answered. A pause. "Nia, this isn't a good time." Another pause, longer this time. "No, Amara can't come to the phone right now. She's sleeping. She's fine, I told you. She just needs rest." Nia, her sister, was on the phone, probably blocks away with the police. Amara's heart soared with desperate hope. "You're where?" Kwame's voice had gone cold. "No, you can't come up here. Nia, I said no." The apartment door burst open with a thunderous crash. "Police, get your hands where I can see them." The bedroom erupted into chaos. Heavy footsteps pounded through the apartment. Voices shouted commands from every direction. Amara's eyes flew open to see Kwame stumbling backward, his hands shooting into the air, his face a mask of shock and fury. On the ground, now, a police officer in tactical gear appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn. Behind him, 2 more officers pushed into the room. "There's been a mistake," Kwame started, his voice taking on that smooth, reasonable tone Amara knew so well. "My wife is sick. She needs help. I was just about to call." "Save it." The officer grabbed Kwame's arm and spun him around, forcing him face down onto the floor. "Kwame Thompson, you're under arrest for human trafficking, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit felony assault." "What? This is insane. I haven't trafficked anyone. Amara, tell them." But Amara was already sitting up, tears streaming down her face as a female officer rushed to her side. "Ma'am, are you Amara Thompson?" the officer asked gently. "Yes," Amara's voice came out as a croak. "Yes, I'm Amara. My sister. Is my sister here?" "I'm here." Nia's voice rang out from the living room, and then she was there, pushing past officers, her face wet with tears. She dropped to her knees beside the bed and pulled Amara into a fierce embrace. "I'm here, baby girl. I'm here. You're safe now." Amara collapsed into her sister's arms, her whole body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for hours. For months. Nia held her tight, rocking her gently, whispering reassurances that Amara barely heard over the sound of Kwame being read his rights. "You don't understand," Kwame was saying, his voice rising with desperation as an officer cuffed his hands behind his back. "She's my wife. She's been having mental health issues. I was trying to help her." "We found your office," another officer said, emerging from the hallway with the notebook in gloved hands and evidence bags full of pills. "We've got surveillance equipment, detailed logs on multiple women, and communications with a trafficking network. You want to keep talking, or you want to wait for your lawyer?" Quame's mouth snapped shut, but his eyes found Amara's across the room, and what she saw there made her blood run cold. Not remorse, not shame, just pure, calculated hatred that she'd ruined his operation. "Get him out of here," the lead officer ordered, and two officers hauled Kwame to his feet and marched him toward the door. As they passed through the bedroom doorway, Kwame turned his head and locked eyes with Amara one last time. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. "All of this was for your own good. You were nothing before I found you. Nothing." "Move," the officer shoved him forward, and Kwame disappeared from view. Amara pressed her face into Nia's shoulder and let herself cry, great, heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her chest. Nia held her through it all, stroking her hair, murmuring words of comfort. "We need to get her to the hospital," the female officer said gently. "She may need medical evaluation, especially if she's been given unknown substances for an extended period." "I'm a nurse," Amara said, lifting her head and wiping her eyes. Her voice was stronger now. "I was a nurse. I know what I need. I need to give a statement. I need to tell you everything." "That can wait," Nia said firmly. "You need to." "No," Amara pulled back and looked at her sister. "It can't wait. There are other women. In his computer files I saw names. Keisha Williams, Tanya Johnson, Marie Davis. Folders marked completed. I don't know what that means, but we need to find them. We need to find them now." The lead officer, a tall black man with kind eyes and gray at his temples, stepped forward. "Detective Marcus Cole," he introduced himself. "You're very brave, Ms. Thompson, and you're right, we do need your statement. But your sister is also right that you need medical care. How about we do both? We'll get you to the hospital, have you checked out, and I'll take your statement there. Deal?" Amara nodded. "The woman. There was a woman here maybe 20 minutes ago. Tall 50s, business suit. She called herself AM. She was going to transport me to a facility. She might still be in the area." Detective Cole's expression sharpened. "Can you describe her more specifically?" As Amara provided details, the woman's height, build, the luxury SUV she'd mentioned, the leather briefcase, officers scrambled into action. One spoke rapidly into a radio. Another pulled up security camera footage from the apartment complex on a tablet. "Got her," an officer called out. "Black Mercedes SUV, leaving the complex at 12:47 p.m. We're running the plates now." "Put out an APB," Cole ordered. "I want every unit in a 10-mile radius looking for that vehicle. She's our connection to the trafficking network." More officers arrived, these in plain clothes, carrying forensic equipment. They spread throughout the apartment, photographing, collecting, documenting. Amara watched them work, a strange numbness settling over her. This place that had been her home, her prison, was now a crime scene. "Come on," Nia said softly, helping Amara stand. "Let's get you out of here." Amara's legs trembled as she walked through the living room. She'd crossed this floor thousands of times in the past 3 years, never knowing that cameras watched her every move. She'd sat on that couch with Kwame, watching movies, planning their future, falling in love with a man who'd never existed. No, that wasn't quite true. She'd fallen in love with a character Kwame had played. The real Kwame was the monster in that office, the one who collected women like objects and sold them to the highest bidder. As they reached the apartment door, Amara stopped and turned back. Detective Cole was standing in the office doorway, surveying the walls of photographs with a grim expression. "Detective," Amara called out. He looked up. In his email, there were mentions of facilities, training programs. "Find those places, please. Those women might still be alive." "We will," Cole promised. "I give you my word, Ms. Thompson. We're going to dismantle this entire operation, starting with your husband." Ex-husband, Amara thought as Nia guided her into the hallway. She didn't know how divorce worked when your spouse was arrested for trying to sell you into slavery, but she'd figure it out. She'd figure everything out. The paramedics were waiting by an ambulance in the parking lot. They helped Amara onto a gurney, checked her vital signs, asked her questions about what substances she'd been given. She answered as best she could, her mind still foggy from months of medication, but clearer than it had been in so long. "Your sister saved your life," one of the paramedics said as he started an IV line. When she showed up at the precinct with those photos, they mobilized immediately. Detective Cole said he's never seen someone act that fast. Amara looked at Nia, who was holding her hand tight enough to hurt. "How did you get here so fast?" "I left school the second I saw your message," Nia said. "Didn't even tell my principal, just ran to my car and drove straight to the police station. When I showed them what you sent me, they knew it was real. We got here as fast as we could. Her voice broke. "I was so scared we'd be too late." "You weren't," Amara whispered. "You weren't too late." As the ambulance pulled away from the complex, Amara looked back at the building. From the outside, it looked so ordinary. Just another apartment complex in Atlanta, with its beige siding and neat landscaping. No one would ever guess what had been happening on the third floor, in apartment 304. But they would know now. Everyone would know what Kwame had done. The ambulance turned onto the main road and Amara closed her eyes. It was over. The nightmare was over. She was safe. Except somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that it wasn't quite over yet. Kwame was in custody, but AM was still out there. The facilities were still operating. The network was still intact. And those three women, Keisha, Tanya, Marie, were still missing. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. But for the first time in 6 months, Amara had something she'd almost forgotten existed: hope. And with her sister beside her and the truth finally exposed, she was ready to fight. She was ready to help bring the whole operation down. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors tracking Amara's vitals. She'd been there for 6 hours, undergoing blood tests, toxicology screens, and a full medical evaluation. The doctor, a tired-looking woman with sympathetic eyes, had confirmed what Amara already knew. Her system was flooded with benzodiazepines and other sedatives. It would take weeks for her body to fully clear the drugs, longer for her mind to fully recover. Nia sat in the chair beside the bed, refusing to leave even when the nurses suggested she get coffee or stretch her legs. She'd barely let go of Amara's hand since they'd arrived. Detective Cole appeared in the doorway, knocking gently on the frame. "Ms. Thompson, are you up for that statement now?" Amara nodded and shifted to sit up straighter. The IV tugged at her arm, but she ignored it. "I'm ready. Did you find her, the woman?" Cole's expression darkened as he pulled up a chair on the other side of the bed. "We found the Merceds abandoned in a parking garage downtown. Wiped clean, no prints, no evidence. She knew what she was doing, but we're working on it." He pulled out a digital recorder and a notepad. "Right now, I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. When did you first meet Kwame Thompson?" Amara took a deep breath and began. She told him about the coffee shop encounter 3 years ago that she now knew had been staged. The whirlwind romance that followed. The proposal after 6 months. The wedding, small and intimate because Kwame had said he wanted to focus on just the two of them, not a big production. Looking back, she realized he'd been isolating her even then. "When did the headache start?" Cole asked, writing notes. 6 months ago, March of last year. Amara's voice was steady, clinical, falling back into her nursing training to keep the emotion at bay. They came on suddenly. Kwame suggested I see Dr. Morrison, said he was a friend, gave great care. I went, and Dr. Morrison prescribed the medication. White pills, no label on the bottle. I should have questioned that, but Kwame said Dr. Morrison preferred to use unmarked bottles for privacy reasons. Did you ever look up this Dr. Morrison? Verify his credentials? Amara's cheeks burned with shame. No, I trusted Kwame. He was my husband. You have nothing to be ashamed of, Cole said firmly. Traffickers are expert manipulators. They choose their targets carefully. From what we found in his records, Kwame specifically looked for women who were isolated, who'd lost family members, who had reasons to be vulnerable. He exploited your trust. That's on him, not you. The words helped a little. Amara continued her story, describing how the medication made her foggy and tired, how she'd quit her job because she couldn't handle it anymore. A decision Kwame had encouraged, supported, praised her for. How her contact with Nia had dwindled to occasional phone calls and rare visits. The spare room, she said. He turned it into his office 3 months ago, said he needed a dedicated workspace for his consulting business. She laughed bitterly. I didn't even know what kind of consulting he did. I was too drugged to ask questions. His consulting business was a front, Cole explained. Kwame Thompson doesn't exist, not legally. The man you married has at least 4 different identities that we've found so far. His real name appears to be Marcus Webb, and he has a criminal record in 3 states for fraud and identity theft. No prior arrests for trafficking, though. This appears to be a newer venture for him. Marcus Webb, even his name had been a lie. Everything had been a lie. The other women, Amara said urgently. Did you find information about them? Cole's expression grew grave. We're working on it. We found detailed files on Keisha Williams, Tanya Johnson, and Marie Davis. All 3 were reported missing by family members within the past 2 years. All 3 disappeared under suspicious but not immediately criminal circumstances, told friends and family they were moving away, taking new jobs, starting fresh somewhere else. Just like Kwame was planning for me, Amara whispered. Exactly like he was planning for you. We've alerted the FBI. This crosses state lines, which makes it a federal case. They're bringing in their trafficking task force. But Ms. Thompson, Amara, we need your help. You saw things in those files, in those emails. You might remember details that could help us locate these facilities, identify the other members of this network. Amara closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember despite how much she wanted to forget. The emails mentioned locations. I saw references to properties in Alabama and South Carolina. One message talked about a rural facility with adequate isolation. Those were the exact words. And there were code names. Eagle's Nest, Magnolia House, Riverside. Cole wrote furiously. This is good, this is really good. What else? The woman, A.M., she said something about the last contractor leaving loose ends and having to clean up his mess personally. The way she said it, Amara shuddered. I think she killed him. I think she kills anyone who becomes a liability. Which means she might come after you, Nia said, her voice tight with fear. You got away, you exposed them, you're a loose end. Cole held up a hand. We're already on that. I've arranged for a protection detail. There will be officers outside this hospital room tonight, and when you're discharged, you'll have protection at whatever location you choose to stay. I'd recommend not going back to the apartment. I never want to see that place again, Amara said immediately. You can stay with me, Nia said. My apartment has good security and I've got a spare room. You'll be safe there. Actually, Cole interjected, I was going to suggest a safe house, just until we have more members of this network in custody. These people are sophisticated, well-funded, and clearly willing to use violence. I don't want to take chances with your safety. The reality of the situation settled over Amara like a weight. She'd escaped Kwame, but the danger wasn't over. AM was still out there. The network was still operating, and she was the witness who could bring it all down. There's something else, Amara said slowly, a memory surfacing through the fog. The morning of the arrest, when AM was here, she answered a phone call. She said something about police activity in the area and that she was aborting the pickup. But the police activity wasn't you coming for me. You weren't there yet. So what was it? Cole frowned. We had units responding to a call about 2 blocks from your apartment complex. A noise complaint. Pretty routine. She wouldn't abort a $50,000 transaction over a noise complaint, Amara said. She's too professional for that, which means she has someone feeding her information, someone who told her there were police in the area and that she should leave. The detective's expression shifted, understanding dawning. You're saying she has someone inside the department, or access to police scanners, or some way of monitoring law enforcement activity in real time, Amara said. She knew about the police presence before you even got there. She left 12 minutes before you arrived. That's not coincidence. Cole stood abruptly. I need to make some calls. This changes things. He headed for the door, then paused and turned back. Amara, you're a very sharp woman. Your husband, Webb, whatever his name is, he underestimated you. They all did. That's going to be their downfall. After he left, Nia squeezed Amara's hand. How are you doing, really? I don't know, Amara admitted. I keep thinking about those other women. Keisha, Tanya, Marie. What if we're too late for them? What if they've been broken? What if they can't come back from what's been done to them? Then we help them anyway, Nia said firmly. Just like we're going to help you come back from this. You're not broken, Amara. You're bruised and scared and hurt, but you're not broken. You pretended to take those pills. You investigated. You gathered evidence. You saved yourself. That's not a broken woman. That's a survivor. Amara wanted to believe her. She wanted to feel like a survivor instead of a victim. But right now, lying in this hospital bed, her body still full of drugs her husband had forced on her for months, she mostly felt tired. A nurse came in to check her vitals, and then a social worker stopped by to talk about resources for trafficking survivors, therapy, support groups, legal aid. Amara listened and nodded and accepted pamphlets, but the information seemed to float around her without landing. It wasn't until visiting hours were almost over that Detective Cole returned. His expression was grim but determined. We got a hit, he said. Based on the property descriptions you remembered from the emails, the FBI cross-referenced with recent real estate transactions and properties owned by shell corporations. They've identified 3 possible locations that match. They're getting warrants now. By tomorrow morning, we'll be hitting all 3 facilities simultaneously. Will you find them? Amara asked. The women. I don't know, Cole said honestly. But we're going to try. And Amara, when we bring them home, it will be because of you. Because you were brave enough to stop taking those pills. Because you gathered evidence instead of just running. You're the reason this whole network is about to come crashing down. After he left, Amara lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere out there, in facilities with code names like Eagle's Nest and Magnolia House, women were being held. Women who'd been conditioned and drugged and broken just like Kwame had tried to break her. But unlike her, they hadn't had a sister who refused to give up. They hadn't had the clarity to recognize what was happening in time to fight back. They'd trusted the wrong person, just like she had, and now they were paying a price that might destroy them. Tomorrow the FBI would raid those facilities. Tomorrow the network would start to unravel. Tomorrow justice would begin. But tonight, Amara closed her eyes and let herself cry one more time, for herself, for those women, and for the life she'd thought she had that had turned out to be nothing but an elaborate trap. When she finally fell asleep, Nia was still there, holding her hand, keeping watch. Keeping her safe. 3 weeks later, Amara stood in front of the mirror in Nia's spare bedroom, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The fog had finally lifted from her mind. The tremors in her hands had stopped. Color had returned to her cheeks, and she'd gained back 8 of the 15 pounds she'd lost. But it was her eyes that looked most different. They were clear, focused, and filled with something she hadn't felt in months: purpose. Today was the day she'd been waiting for. Today, she would face Kwame in court. "You ready?" Nia appeared in the doorway, dressed in a sharp navy suit. She'd taken a leave of absence from teaching to be with Amara through every step of this process: the police interviews, the FBI debriefings, the therapy sessions, and now the preliminary hearing. "I'm ready," Amara said, and she meant it. The drive to the courthouse was quiet. Detective Cole had arranged for them to enter through a side entrance to avoid the media circus that had erupted after the story broke. Amara hadn't realized how big the case had become until she'd seen the headlines. Atlanta trafficking ring exposed. Husband arrested for drugging, selling wife. FBI raids uncover multi-state slavery operation. But the headlines didn't tell the whole story. They didn't tell the story of Keisha Williams, who'd been found at the Alabama facility, emaciated and traumatized but alive. They didn't tell the story of Marie Davis, rescued from a home in South Carolina where she'd been held as a domestic servant for 18 months, so heavily drugged she barely remembered her own name. And they didn't tell the story of Tanya Johnson, whose body had been found in a shallow grave behind what they called Eagle's Nest, dead for over a year, her only crime being that she'd tried to escape. Amara had cried for Tanya, a woman she'd never met but who'd suffered the fate that could have been her own. The FBI had arrested 17 people in connection with the trafficking network. A.M., whose real name was Angela Moss, a former social worker turned trafficker, had been caught trying to flee the country. She was facing federal charges that would put her away for life. Dr. Morrison, the physician who'd provided the drugs and falsified medical records, was also in custody. The investigation had spread to 6 states and was still ongoing. But today was about Kwame, Marcus Webb, whatever his real name was. Inside the courtroom, Amara took her seat in the front row with Nia beside her and Detective Cole behind them. The room slowly filled with people: lawyers, journalists, FBI agents, and family members of other victims. Amara spotted a woman who had to be Keisha Williams' mother, clutching a tissue and staring straight ahead with hollow eyes. Then the door opened, and Kwame was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. His hair was disheveled, his face unshaven, and he looked smaller somehow, diminished. When his eyes found Amara's across the courtroom, she didn't look away. She held his gaze steadily, letting him see that she wasn't broken, wasn't afraid, wasn't the drugged and compliant woman he'd tried to create. She saw the moment he realized it. His expression hardened, his jaw clenched, but there was something else there too, a flicker of fear. He was the one in chains now. He was the one whose life was over. The judge entered and the hearing began. The prosecutor laid out the charges: human trafficking, kidnapping, conspiracy, fraud, identity theft. The list went on and on. Evidence was presented: the photographs from his office, the surveillance equipment, the detailed logs, the financial transactions. Email correspondence with Angela Moss and other network members. Testimony from FBI agents who'd raided the facilities. And then it was Amara's turn to speak. She walked to the witness stand on steady legs, was sworn in, and sat down. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Janet Hughes, approached with a kind but professional expression. "Ms. Thompson, can you tell the court how you met the defendant?" Amara took a breath and began. She told them everything: the staged meeting at the coffee shop, the courtship, the marriage, the gradual isolation, the headaches that had appeared out of nowhere, the pills that stole 6 months of her life, the moment she decided to stop taking them, and what she discovered when her mind finally cleared. "Can you describe what you saw when you entered the defendant's office?" Hughes asked. "Photographs," Amara said, her voice clear and strong. "Hundreds of photographs of me, taken without my knowledge or consent, some from before we even met, which means he'd been stalking me for years. There were also files on other women, Keisha Williams, Tanya Johnson, Marie Davis. He'd been watching all of us, studying us, planning our destruction. She watched Kwame flinch at the word destruction, and something fierce and satisfied bloomed in her chest. "And what did you do when you made this discovery?" "I gathered evidence. I photographed everything. I sent it to my sister, and I pretended to be unconscious when my husband and Angela Moss discussed selling me to a client for $50,000. Amara's voice never wavered. "I heard them talk about transporting me to a facility for domestic placement. I heard them discuss how thoroughly I'd been isolated, how no one would look for me. They were wrong about that last part." Objection, Kwame's public defender stood. "Hearsay." "Overruled," the judge said. "This is a preliminary hearing. Continue, Ms. Thompson." Amara continued, detailing everything she'd overheard, everything she'd seen. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom except for Kwame's. He stared at her with cold hatred, and Amara stared right back. "Thank you, Ms. Thompson," Hughes said. "No further questions." The defense attorney stood for cross-examination, but his questions were weak, easily deflected. He tried to suggest that Amara had misunderstood, that the pills were legitimate medication, that the photographs were just a husband's way of showing love. But the evidence was overwhelming, and even he seemed to know it. When Amara was finally dismissed, she returned to her seat beside Nia, who grabbed her hand and squeezed tight. The hearing continued for another hour, with testimony from Detective Cole and FBI agent Sarah Chen, who'd led the facility raids. Finally, the judge spoke. "I've heard enough. The defendant will be held without bail pending trial. Given the severity of the charges, the strength of the evidence, and the defendant's history of using false identities, he is deemed a flight risk and a danger to the community." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. "We're adjourned." Amara watched as Kwame was led away. He didn't look back at her. Within seconds he was gone, and she realized that would probably be the last time she ever saw him in person. The trial would come eventually, but she wouldn't need to testify again. Her statement today, combined with the mountain of physical evidence, was more than enough. Outside the courthouse, Detective Cole pulled Amara aside. "I wanted you to know, Keisha Williams is awake and talking. She's been asking about you. She wanted me to tell you thank you." "Thank me?" Amara's eyes filled with tears. "For what?" "For being brave enough to stop taking the pills, for gathering evidence, for breaking this case open." Cole's expression was gentle. "She said if you hadn't done what you did, she'd still be in that facility. Marie Davis said the same thing. You saved them, Amara. You saved yourself, and in doing so, you saved them too." The tears spilled over, but these weren't tears of pain or fear. These were tears of relief, of release, of something that felt almost like peace. "Can I meet them?" Amara asked. "Keisha and Marie." "When they're ready, yes. They're both in treatment facilities now, getting the help they need, but I'll let them know you asked." Cole paused. "What will you do now? Are you planning to go back to nursing?" Amara thought about it. She'd loved being a nurse, loved helping people, healing people. But she wasn't the same woman who'd worn those scrubs and worked those 12-hour shifts. That Amara had died somewhere in Kwame's apartment, smothered by pills and lies. This Amara was different. Harder in some ways, but also stronger. More aware of the darkness that existed in the world, but also more determined to fight it. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "Right now I'm just focused on healing, but eventually, I want to help other women. Women who have been through what I've been through. I want them to know they can survive it, that they can come back from it." "You will," Cole said with certainty. "You already are." That evening, back at Nia's apartment, Amara sat on the couch with a cup of tea and her sister beside her. The news was playing on TV, showing footage from outside the courthouse. There was Amara on the screen, walking down the courthouse steps with her head held high. She barely recognized herself. "I'm proud of you," Nia said softly. "Mom and Dad would be so proud of you." Amara thought of her parents, both gone for years now. They'd raised her to be strong, to be independent, to never let anyone diminish her worth. Somehow, she'd forgotten those lessons. She'd let Kwame convince her she needed him, that she was weak without him, that she couldn't trust her own mind. Never again. What would you have done? Amara asked Nia suddenly. If you were in my situation, if you realized your husband had been drugging you, that he was planning to sell you. Nia was quiet for a long moment, considering. I'd like to think I would have done exactly what you did. Been smart, gathered evidence, gotten help. But honestly, I don't know if I would have had your courage. You didn't panic. You didn't run. You made a plan and you executed it perfectly, even while those drugs were still in your system. That's incredible, Amara. I was terrified, Amara admitted. Every second of that day, I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Nia said, echoing something their father used to say. It's moving forward despite the fear. You did that. You saved yourself. Amara's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She opened it cautiously, then smiled. It was from Detective Cole. Keisha would like to meet you next week if you're ready. No pressure, only when and if you want to. She typed back, I'm ready. Because she was ready. Ready to move forward, ready to help others, ready to reclaim the life that Kwame had tried to steal from her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be therapy and nightmares and moments when the trauma felt overwhelming. There would be a trial to get through, with all the media attention and invasive questions that came with it. But there would also be healing. There would be Nia, steadfast and loving. There would be other survivors like Keisha and Marie, women who understood what she'd been through because they'd survived it too. There would be purpose in helping others escape the same fate. And eventually, there would be a day when Amara thought about Kwame and felt nothing at all. Not fear, not anger, not pain. Just indifference, because he would be a chapter in her past, not the defining story of her life. That day wasn't today, but it was coming. Amara took a sip of her tea and looked at her sister. Thank you, she said, for not giving up on me, for believing me when I sent you those messages, for saving my life. You saved your own life, Nia corrected. I just showed up at the right time. You're the hero of this story, Amara. Don't ever forget that. As the sun set over Atlanta, casting orange and pink light through the apartment windows, Amara felt something shift inside her. The fear that had been her constant companion for weeks began to recede, replaced by something stronger, something brighter. Hope. She had survived. Against all odds, against a system designed to break her, against a man who tried to erase her very identity, she had survived. And not only that, she had won. The story could have ended so differently. It had ended differently for Tanya Johnson, who would never get the chance to reclaim her life. But for Amara, for Keisha, for Marie, and for the countless other women who would be saved because this network had been exposed, there was a future. A chance to heal, to grow, to become even stronger than they'd been before. Amara set down her tea and pulled out her laptop. She opened a blank document and stared at the cursor blinking on the white page. Then she began to type. My name is Amara Thompson. This is my story. She wrote about the coffee shop, the pills, the photographs, the escape. She wrote about fear and courage, about being broken and choosing to heal. She wrote for herself, but also for every woman who might someday find herself in a similar situation. She wrote so they would know, you can survive this. You can fight back. You can win. Hours later, when she finally stopped typing, Nia had fallen asleep on the other end of the couch. Amara saved the document and closed her laptop. Tomorrow, she might share it with a victims advocacy group, or maybe with a publisher interested in survivor stories, or maybe she'd just keep it for herself, a reminder of how far she'd come. But tonight, it was enough to have written it, to have claimed her story as her own, not as something that happened to her, but as something she survived. Outside, Atlanta continued its endless rhythm, cars passing, lights twinkling, life moving forward. And inside Nia's apartment, safe and healing and whole, Amara Thompson finally allowed herself to rest. The nightmare was over. Her new life was just beginning. So, what would you have done in Amara's situation? Have you ever seen or heard of something like this happening? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about recognizing the warning signs and protecting ourselves and our loved ones. And if this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life you might help save.